All right, welcome everyone. Good evening and welcome to the Successful MD Finding Balance in Your Professional and Personal Lives event. This event is presented by the Faculty of Medicine Alumni Engagement Office as well as the Resident Wellness Office from the Postgrad Office. So I'm Kira Davis and I work with the Alumni Office, and we're thrilled to have such an excellent before I step on the baby, an excellent panel of speakers here today who have volunteered their time to share their thoughts and opinions on the struggle versus the reality of becoming a successful MD and what that means. But before we dive into this conversation, I wanted to take a few minutes to share with you a little bit about our office. So our Alumni Office is located at this building, which is called the Medical Student and Alumni Center. Many of you have maybe been here before, or it might be your first time to this space. This space is really unique because it offers recreational and social space for our students and our alumni, as well as our residents. So there's a gym across the way. We obviously have a few lecture halls here, as well as a kitchen and some other lounge spaces. So as a resident or a young alumnus, you have the option to become a Medical Alumni Association member. You can do that for $25 a year, and that would allow you to have access to this space. So if anyone's interested in gaining access to the space, it is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Please feel free to talk to one of our staff here this evening, and we'd be happy to get you set up with that. Other than that, I want to introduce Rebecca Turnbull, who is so I got this right, Resident Wellness Counselor with the Postgrad Office, and then she'll be turning it over to Dr. Rhonda Low.
Thanks, Kira. So I just wanted to also take a few moments just to remind you about the services that the Resident Wellness Office provides. We are a free and confidential support service for all residents. And so we are focused on promoting health and wellness throughout residency. So that involves one-on-one counseling, group support, workshops, and sponsoring events like this. A big part of our mandate is focusing on connection and community. So when Kira asked us to be a part of tonight, it made perfect sense for our offices to collaborate. So we're thrilled to be here tonight. And for those of you tuning in, wherever the camera is, and that's our picture that you'll see a lot of, that's our focus: compassion, connection, community. So we really like to get those points across. But we're pleased to have Dr. Rhonda Low here tonight, and I will just take a few minutes to introduce you. Dr. Rhonda Low practices family medicine full-time in Vancouver. She received her Bachelor of Science degree with honors in cell biology from UBC and is a graduate of UBC Medical School, class of 1982. She's a fellow of both the College of Physicians of Canada and American College of Family Physicians. Dr. Low is a clinical associate professor in the Department of Family and Community Medicine at UBC. With experience teaching both undergraduate and postgraduate medical students, she has twice been nominated by students for Teacher of the Year Award in the Faculty of Medicine. In 1996, Dr. Low began co-hosting a television series on alternative medicine for the Life and Knowledge Network, and has guest hosted for Dr. Art Hister's House Calls radio program on CKNW. Dr. Low spent 15 years as the health expert for CTV News, appearing on air 5 nights a week with topics that she produced herself. So Dr. Low is very busy and very talented. Dr. Low played an instrumental role in the establishment of the Asian Women's Health Centre in Vancouver. She was also an examiner for the Formal Clinical Competence Program of BC for UBC and the College of Physicians and Surgeons. And she is a longtime Secretary Executive Committee member for St. Paul's Hospital Annual Refresher Course for Primary Care Physicians. So thank you for being here tonight.
So you can tell that when I told my non-physician friends that I was going to help moderate tonight amongst our illustrious panel, something on work-life balance, well, they laughed at me. They thought, what do you know about this? And I said, yeah, that's right. What do I know about it? I'm a doctor. I mean, you guys must have that same feeling as well. So that's the point of it, though. That's why we're here. And it's because it's such an important discussion to have. This is something that I wish I had when I was in medical school or in residency or just starting out, because, you just kind of fell into it. You never really thought much of it, and your career just unfolded ahead, and there was no thinking, and okay, we'll go down this path, we'll go down that path. Oh, this opportunity came to you. Do we take it? Do we not? there wasn't anyone with some thought to help with guidance, and that's why I'm just so happy to have been invited tonight to have this chance to talk about it, because I think it's important to start out that dialogue now when you're all starting out in your own profession. Well, we know that medicine is a demanding profession. I mean, you've gone through medical school, you've gone through residency, now you're just starting out in practice. But the big problem is how are you going to have a successful career? Is there a way that you can guide that to have a successful career? Or the other questions are, if a leadership opportunity comes up, how do you know which leadership opportunity you should take? You know, is the right way to go? Who do you talk to? How do you bounce ideas off us? And then the question you've probably asked yourself a million times, but you haven't really voiced to anybody else is there such a thing as having a successful medical career and a successful personal life at the same time? Can you have both? Or in fact, is it a myth? So those are some of the important questions we're going to be discussing tonight, because we have a great panel here who have all experienced those questions. They've challenged them themselves. They've taken some opportunities. They've learned how to make it work, or still may be making it work amongst us all. But some thoughts on where we're going to go tonight. And so I'm going to give you some ideas of who we've got with us, and I'd like to introduce them to you right now. We've got Dr. Randy Mackhoff to my right here. Dr. Mackhoff has significant experience working with athletes and business executives in the area of performance enhancement and developing coping strategies in dealing with a broad range of stressors that interfere with performance. He also consults to a number of police departments, both in Canada and internationally, and his areas of focus include treating individuals experiencing difficulties, but not limited to folks who have anxiety, trauma, and depression. He was just talking tonight or today in how to negotiate in hostage situations and how to help calm folks down with that. We won't digress. We'll do that today. He also has an interest in providing psychological assistance to individuals who are coping with health-related issues. Now, next to Randy is Dr. Rowan Preston. She received her medical degree from the University of Ottawa, and she subsequently completed a fellowship in obstetrical anesthesia at the University of Toronto Women's College Hospital. Currently, Rowan is the department head of anesthesiology, pharmacology, and therapeutics at UBC, and also the division head of obstetrical anesthesia in that department. Dr. Preston's area of practice and research interests focus on obstetrical anesthesia, the obstetric airway, and patient safety. She is also a member of the Perinatal Coordinating Council at Vancouver Coastal Health, the Provincial Perinatal Mortality Committee, and the Caesarean Section Task Force. That's Dr. Preston. Next to Dr. Preston is Dr. Simon Periphery, who received his medical degree from UBC in the year 2000. And in his second year of medical school at UBC, Dr. Periphery joined Médecins Sans Frontières as a nutritionist during the civil war in Zaire, which is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. Since then, he has worked as a physician with Médecins Sans Frontières and other organizations in the Congo, Haiti, and Nepal. And most recently, he spent 12 months with his family helping direct the new emergency medicine residency program at the National University of Rwanda. Dr. Periphery has twin 10-year-olds and is a clinical assistant professor in emergency medicine and clinically works at Lionsgate Hospital and St. Paul's Hospital, and he's the UBC Emergency Medicine Residency Director. And finally, we've got Dr. Beth Taylor over there with Bambino, and Dr. Taylor completed her residency in 2005 at UBC, specializing in obstetrics and gynecology. She completed a fellowship in reproductive endocrinology and infertility and joined the Genesis Fertility Center as co-director. In 2013, she co-founded the Olive Fertility Center, which is a comprehensive IVF and fetal diagnosis center where she continues to serve currently as co-director. Dr. Taylor is a clinical associate professor at UBC and coordinates the UBC ONG residency program, reproductive endocrinology, and infertility rotation. She's a staff member at both BC Women's Hospital and VGH, and perform surgery at both campuses. Dr. Taylor has 4 kids, a dog, a fish, and a hamster. That's her real busy life. That's her real life. So please give our panelists a warm welcome. Okay, so before we start, we've just got a few housekeeping details tonight, and I'm just going to let you know how the Dialogues event is going to unfold. So for the first 30 minutes right now, I'm going to be asking our panelists a series of questions, and they're each going to give a bit of an answer. And then after that, we're going to turn the floor over to you. And those of us who are tuning in from afar, hello, everybody from afar. And we're going to give you a chance to ask questions of our panelists. And then after that, we'll have a chance to just hang around and talk and mingle and get to know each other if you have any more questions for any of us. Okay? So let's get started. I'm going to start with an overall question, just a general question, and I'm going to give each of the panelists a minute to answer so that you get to know where they're coming from and what their position is on the topic of work-life balance tonight. And then after that, we're going to delve a little deeper. So, Beth, we're going to start with you with the first question. Oh, your little guy is so cute. Watching him. Okay. Let's ask, could you please define what being a successful physician means to you?
I think being successful means you go to work and you're happy or at least content most of the time, and you go home and you're happy and content most of the time. And I don't expect much more than that, and I feel like I'm successful in doing that. I think it's managing the guilt and stress that goes along with all the things you're not achieving. I think that's how I achieve some feeling of success. And I also think it's also important to spend less than you earn. So I think financially, that's part of the story of physician success, is not overspending. So for me, I go to work happy, I go home, I'm happy, and I can afford my lifestyle. And that's how I define success for me.
Thanks, Beth. Simon, how does success look to you?
Well, I think Beth summed it up pretty well there. I think I'd go on to feel like, or to say that, to add to what Beth's talking about, is to feel like your life has a purpose that you want. And if it doesn't, then you need to think about how you're going to make it have that purpose. And with that purpose, you need, I feel like I want to be competent in my purpose. And that purpose is maybe going to work and doing what we do as physicians. And also, it extends to what else is important in your life, be it your family, be it your other activities, be it how you view the rest of the world. So the success part comes with balancing the demands of all those things, the work, the family, the friends, the other parts of your life. And that is a constant struggle, opportunity, adventure, depending on the day.
Thanks, Simon. Rowan, what's your take on that?
So when I looked at this question, I said, I actually divide up my life a little bit more succinctly because of the number of roles I have. So as a clinician, so I'm an anesthesiologist, I work at 3 different places, which is moderately insane. It's that I actually get contentment out of my clinical practice, which means it satisfies me, still offers me some challenge, and if it doesn't, I find something different to do. But also I'm still giving my patients the best care. From my academic work, to me it's not about publications or grants, although that's how UBC judges me. It's actually about whether I manage to actually change people's practice. And so one of my big things is knowledge translation. So to me, success there is when I hear back from people I've given talks to and teaching who feedback and say, hey, I'm really interested in this. This is what I'm doing. I want to change to what you've suggested based upon the evidence. That gives me, actually defines my success there. And finally, leadership. Leadership, I think, is the most difficult in many ways because when leadership roles, you often have a lot of managerial and administrative parts as well, and they are the frustrating parts of leadership. So for me, leadership success is when I'm still moving forward towards the goals that I think are important for the role that I'm in, and that I think that I'm still adding value to those I'm supposedly leading. And once I lose that sense, then I find something else. Because I think, sometimes we hang around too long in leadership roles and you just get stale and frustrated. And then, of course, I balance it all with my other life. I do have a life.
Okay. Thanks, Rowan. Well, so each person has defined what success might mean to them. Is that important, Randy? Should we actually sit back and say, how important is it for each of us to define success? Should we sit down now? We've got new folks starting out in their careers. Should they define success first?
I think that, first of all, I'm not a physician. I'm a psychologist. So I have not had the same experience as you, but I have my PhD in psychology from UBC. Success is something that I think has to be done intentionally, but it's also very much, in my opinion, developmental. So at each different stage in life, there are a number of different developmental tasks that need to be achieved in order to have a feeling of success. As it pertains to work, it is going to wax and wane in terms of the intensity of the work, in terms of the actual pursuits during the work, and also setting realistic expectations for yourself. That's not to sell yourself short, but to have realistic expectations so that you're not driving yourself in one direction and forgoing everything else in your life. It becomes very risky if you start to recognize after a couple of years of practice that you've become a used-to-be person. I used to play hockey, I used to play tennis, I used to do whatever, and now all I'm doing is working. That will not be a measure of success for yourself at a much later developmental stage. So to answer your question directly, I think it's important to be intentional, to take an inventory on a reasonably regular basis, to make sure that that success that you're pursuing is something that you actually want, and that you're moving in the direction that you want to be moving in.
So you're saying check in with yourself on a regular basis and be mindful.
Absolutely. Be mindful, check in with yourself, and check in with those who are important in your life, because sometimes they have a better perspective than you do.
Whether you want to hear that or not from that perspective. Okay, so we've got another question then, and we'll move on. So, here you are, you're working hard now, you're buried. Your clinical work is taking all your time, you're feeling buried, but you think you want to move forward with your career. So, how do you push yourself to find those leadership opportunities then when you're busy in your clinical practice? Where do you find those leadership opportunities, and how do you push yourself forward to do that? Rowan, you spoke about leadership a minute ago. Can you speak to that question?
So I'll acknowledge it's always one of those challenges, but I think you find out pretty early that you have some interest in leadership, and I think you then actually have to be intentional about pursuing it and carving out the time. And it might seem crazy initially, so I always laugh and say, how to end up getting to leadership so soon? My problem was I started finding problems and I offered solutions, and you therefore get volunteered to things. But I found out that I actually enjoyed it. It was one of those things that helped define what I consider to be a success for myself. But then you have to be intentional, you have to carve it out. And how do I do that? I actually drop clinical work sometimes because I get too bundled up, and sometimes the leadership things are important. But I have conversations with myself and my husband and check in regularly about what are the things that I actually want to achieve. But I do say start early. If you're interested in leadership, start early, because it helps you develop. So when you're in that first time in that role, you actually already have some tools to use. Otherwise, sometimes it can be a little, difficult the first time round when you have your first failure.
Beth, you've got 4 kids. So the big question I'm sure some folks are asking in here too is, how do you manage to balance the life that you have, your busy life, with your professional life?
I think to...
How do you build a successful practice while you're doing that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really, I don't feel balanced, like, look at me. This is not the picture of balance. This is the only outfit that fits me, and I haven't eaten supper yet. So let's just put the word balance off the table and call it a juggle. But it's a juggle I really like. I like the chaos. I like that my house is full of life and laughter and fighting and chaos. I love that, and so that's part of why this is number 4. But if I was to say how the things that I think allow me to balance is, the first thing is that I've come to be okay with mediocrity. So I'm okay that I'm not a great cook, and I'm okay that I don't dress that well, and I'm okay that I don't have a million friends, and I'm okay. but I want to be good at a couple of things that are my key values. So I want to be a good mom, and I want to be a good doctor. And everything else I kind of say, look, I'll just be okay at that, and I'll, not be at every event for my kids, and I'll not be the greatest at some other thing, and I won't be a triathlete, and I won't be all those things. And I struggled for a long time to try to balance it all and do everything, and then I just said, okay, you know what, I'm just going to decide what my core values are and just pursue those and be really good at those, and I'd like to think be excellent at those, and everything else let become mediocre. And so I'm not a great leader. I don't do really any meaningful clinical research, and those are things that when I was in your position, I thought I was going to do it all, and I realize now that I can't. Some people can. But so I would say accept mediocrity. I would also say pick your partner really well, because, that person has to sort of share your values and also work as hard as you and contribute in the same way to your family. So pick your partner well and be okay with mediocrity would be my two kind of points for balancing that is, I don't know if that...
Simon, as a male physician, how would you say you achieve some balance as well?
I need a new question.
Well, I guess for those of you who don't know, Simon's married to a physician as well. So they have a trade-off, and they have these twin daughters. So I guess the question is how do you decide in partnership? How do you balance with building your career, her career, and how do you work it out?
Yeah, as you can see by my reluctance, this is a big not a loaded question, but the answer is not straightforward at all. And not to piggyback back again on Beth, but she says there's a lot of truth there. And I look at how my life has evolved now. I'm in my mid-40s. I've been in practice 15 years. I have 2 kids. I have a house. I have a bunch of roles that I've tried or a bunch of roles that I do. And I've suddenly sort of found myself, well, what is balance, and what is really important for me to be doing? And I have to confess, some days, I struggle and say, I should be doing more, or I should be taking on more of a leadership role, like Rowan's described, or I've missed that boat on implementing this new, a new program at the hospital from an emergency medicine standpoint, and so there's. To sit up here is a great privilege, but at the same time, it's not a straightforward path. I'm answering this question in a longer-winded way, but here again, it comes back to really boiling down to what's important to you and what are you going to do about it, and what do you need to do about it. There's some times where you need to push to make something happen. If you don't have what you're, for me, one of the things was I want my kids and family to live somewhere else for a good spell of time while we're doing something somewhat useful. And you don't just sort of look up for a job in Rwanda, but I found a job and made that happen. And everybody went and everyone came back and everything worked out. And so it's pushing the boundary sometimes to make things happen, but also accepting sometimes that, I'm not going to be a great researcher, or I'm not going to be a great administrator, and balancing that. In terms of the home life, I'm an emerge doc, so I barely work, apparently. But, I do work I am home a lot during the day, and I'm home a lot during the day because I work a lot of weekends and nights and things. So I do end up with a fair chunk of being involved with direct children and making lunches and going to soccer practice and that kind of stuff. And that is something that I've chosen to want to do, and that is a choice of mine. If I had chosen not to do that, then it would be a great struggle. So the balance piece only comes because you want it to come, and you want it to become because it's what you've chosen to do. So those are the choices that you have to make wisely.
So in that sense, and as Beth said, it's choose wisely as well when it comes to your significant other. So Simon, was there a conscious discussion with your partner, with your wife, about does one of you become the breadwinner? Does one of you become the caregiver? Or how did you work it out that you had a dialogue on that? Because sometimes, when you're first starting out, you think, okay, it's got to be one or the other. You got to be the breadwinner, you got to be the caregiver. How did you come to that dialogue?
I think, first of all, it's 2015. The gender roles are, they shouldn't be a big deal. They really shouldn't. End of story. And here again, like we all naturally choose partners or relationships, you find things that fit, and you don't have at least I don't think too many people have an Excel sheet of things they must check off, but you have to have a compatibility. So we didn't have a discussion like, okay, you're going to make 60% and I'm going to do the rest of the 40. But it just, it evolves, and you have to move with those evolutions as well of what's becoming more important with the family and with career, and how does that balance. And yeah, some things you let go, and other things you take. But the bottom line is that if there's something that's really important, you have to make that happen or if there's something really important for your spouse or partner, or you have to help them make that happen. And then you also have to then concede or let go of other things that are less important.
Amongst your, I'm going to ask all of you this too, amongst your partners, amongst your coworkers, did you feel that there was ever any judgment levied against you by your coworkers or your partners when you decided to be the caregiver? You said, I've got to leave right now. I've got to take care of the kids. I can't take on that responsibility. I've got to go. Do you ever feel there was that kind of subtle pressure or prejudice that you might feel from staff men somewhere?
No.
And since you're the program director, that's great about that one to know that if you're in emergency medicine right now, folks, you can rest assured. Rowan, what would you say to that?
I don't have children, and so I think that's an important thing, not by choice, just didn't happen. But that was a negotiation discussion with my husband. I don't believe you can do it all. There are many things I would never have had the opportunity to do if I had children, because I would have made different choices. So I acknowledge that, and I know that. So in many ways, but my husband and I, he's not a physician, but we do a lot of negotiating around things which are important, and you actually have to do that. And we don't have sick children, but right now we have a sick cat, and I feel really guilty that I'm not at home, but we've negotiated our way around who shows up to deal with the poor kitty who needs to have meds 4 times a day, et cetera, right? And so we do work through that, and there are times when you have to do the thing and you say, okay, I can take this time, and I just tell unfortunately I just tell them I'm not going to be there, right? I'm at the point now in my career I can just say, that's in my calendar is a big X. And I say, don't book anything else.
So part of that is maybe we do it to ourselves too. We don't give ourselves permission. We feel that we have to do something, and that's been the focus, hasn't it? All through medical school, all through residency, it's been so intense. You've been so focused doing things, and then starting your career, you're so focused and intense to go that way. So the next question is what happens to your identity? All of a sudden, your identity becomes all wrapped up in this person who's worked so hard, who becomes a physician, who is not necessarily the other part of you who used to be, as Randy says. So, Randy, I'm going to ask you that question. How do you create an identity that isn't necessarily shaped by what you are contributing to your profession?
That is an extremely difficult question to answer. Identity is core to this discussion about work-life balance, because often what we do is we load up on one area of our life, let's say work, because somehow we have configured an identity that is congruent with that. And it's very important to satiate that identity by engaging in long work hours and never saying no. And that identity, by the way, I would argue, transcends into other areas. And it is an identity that then you take on into relationships. It's an identity you take into friendships, intimate relationships, recreational activities, perhaps. So it's a question that I don't think I can answer in a brief manner, because you have to examine other influences in your life. What were the messages from your parents, from those who raised you? What were the influences from other important figures in your life as to how they see you and how you've internalized that and how you've shaped your identity? I think it's really important that with identity, however, that you recognize that saying no doesn't betray your identity, does not actually put yourself down. It's one of the key concepts, by the way, in negotiations. I always like to say this, I'm spitting as I'm speaking. I always like to say this, that I went to Harvard for continuing education, and I can pretend I went to Harvard, which I didn't. But one of the key things about negotiations is what happens in a negotiation often reflects the negotiator's identity, what they will fold on, what they will push for. And I think this notion of identity and work-life balance is central. You have to know who you are. You have to be prepared to accept some discomfort as you move out of your comfort zone, as you move away from what you've seen as being your core identity, as you establish those things that are important to you. And I do agree with what your opening comments are. There is no such thing as work-life balance. That's a myth, and it was created largely by psychologists.
He freely admits it. Beth, with respect to your residents, have you seen a shift on the demands of the residents right now compared to when you were in residency?
And sorry about this. I didn't want him to be a distraction. I dreamed he would sleep for this whole time, so I apologize for this. I think there's been a shift in medicine since I went through in the 90s. That it used, the saying was, the problem with 1 and 2 call is that you miss half the good cases. And, there's a lot of ego about staying late and being there and doing more and more and more. And the person who stayed the longest usually gets the most kudos, or the person, who does the extra usually is the one who gets most congratulation. That feeds your ego, and it feeds your ego in a way, honestly, that your kids don't and your partner doesn't. And so it feels really good to be the one that knew it was Kawasaki's disease or something like that, and who did all the extra work and stayed late post-call. And I love that ego part of medicine, and I was the one who stayed late, and I did all those things, which is why I'm 42, still having children, because I put that off. But I really loved that about medicine. I really boosted my ego. But I've had to make the shift to say, okay, the kids, give me something different than an ego boost, but it's just as valuable. So I think as I've shifted over the last 20 years, I think all of medicine has, thankfully, and we're so privileged to live in this time when now it's 1 in 4 call, and now when you tell your program director that you're pregnant, it's not met with horror. And there has been a real shift in what we're allowed to do in medicine and what we're given permission to do, I think, by the construct. So enjoy that, because it's a real improvement, and I think it'll continue to improve to that. When you say, no, I actually have to leave to pick up my kids at kindergarten, that's respected as much as the person who stays late to admit 2 more patients, if you know what I mean. I think it's a shifting time, and it's really positive what's happened in the last, and you folks have been through that even maybe more so.
Simon, for your residents, do you see that the demands now are a little bit different on them than it was in the days when you were a resident?
Yeah, they're definitely different, but they probably have equal amounts of stress or anxiety about what they're doing or not doing and what they're trying to do and how they're going to make that happen. I think it's by nature, it's a stressful time.
But it's more positive? Do you think that everything that's happening, positive stress, guys, we're talking about positive stress. But do you think it's moving for the better in the sense that the pressures on the residents and the expectations that they feel, is it a little bit less skewed than what Beth was talking about?
Yeah, I think the residency associations and work, the 24, I'm not sure what we're at. I think it was a big deal. I remember when we were in residence that we went to a 36-hour call day. So that seemed, and even at that time we were chided for, wow, you're going to miss a lot of cases if you're only going to the hospital and staying there for 36 hours. And so now I don't know what it is. I think it might be 24, or some residencies, I think it's 12. But so you're going to get the flack from other people downstream, but it comes back to being, no one is going to be responsible, or no one's going to provide you with your happiness or your balance except yourself. And it feeds into maybe a later discussion, is that this train that we're on, or that you guys are on in particular, and then you get launched into your career, is one where you've had to jump through hoops and get marks, get accolades, do interesting things, make your life very attractive, so to get into medical school and be very interesting and be very motivated and be very determined. And these are all extrinsic type forces that then that add up on you and then make you feel good and things. And there gets to a point where you have to realize that the intrinsic things run out or are not valuable, and it has to be something from within. And so,
Rowan, in the program, in your department, do you think there are opportunities? Do opportunities exist for people to have these dialogues between themselves about what trade-offs you have to make, what you plan to do beforehand, and how they're met? Will they be met positively in the department? Will the opportunity even exist in the first place to talk about it?
Yeah, I think that's one of the changes. I think that we're much more amenable to having those kind of discussions more openly. The other change we certainly have seen in anesthesia residency since I was an anesthesia resident is the number who choose to start their families during the residency program. And that's good for the female side of it, because as you know, you're much more likely to be successful when you're young and not putting it off, although Beth would, Beth contradicts that. But that's one of those realities. But it's a tough decision because it makes the residency harder because you do take time off after. It's stressful, of course, being in your third trimester and trying to give an anesthetic, let me tell you. I haven't done it, but my poor friends, some of them. So, it's that trade-off, but I think it's important that people are talking about these things, and they're talking about some of these things that are important to talk about when you are a resident. And amongst the residency program, amongst the residents. So I think there's better balance than there used to be, where it was driven, as Beth was talking about in many ways.
And so folks are still sometimes a little bit shy and reluctant to open up that dialogue initially. Randy, if you had residents that are a bit shy and they know that the tide's turning, what are some strategies that residents or young clinicians can use to open up that dialogue because they don't know how it's going to be met? So how they can preface comments, pat phrases, something that will open up strategy.
And they're opening up the strategy with
their colleagues with their staff men. Just to have that dialogue about being able to have their time or some difficulties they're having, or, yes, I'd like to take this moment to have my family and start my family, just to feel that they're afraid to do that.
Yeah, I mean, and the fear is what inhibits. I think that the way to open up the dialogue is, first of all, to acknowledge what's going on inside you and what's inhibiting you. There are always work norms and work cultural norms. And sometimes these are assumed, sometimes they're implicit, sometimes they're explicit. But I think that if you venture, again, outside your comfort zone to talk to some colleagues, to talk to some more experienced people, and change the topic if I'm off topic, it's important to recognize that we have much more in common than we have that is different. And so as you start to bridge that discussion, as you put forward how you're feeling, what your concerns are, I think that often you'll be met by people who actually will acknowledge that and will own some of the similar concerns or some of the similar experiences that you have had. And so it is really talking about how you're feeling. And if someone were to tell you that what you're feeling is wrong, that's somebody who you can't really trust what they're saying anyways, because those are your feelings and those are your experiences. So it's overcoming that fear that inhibits you, and then talking, first of all, with some trusted people that will normalize things, and then to extend that beyond that.
I bet the one thing you feel that you don't have is time. You don't have time to do this. You don't have time to do that. So, and I'll hear that sometimes from my patients. Well, I was in this car accident and you just weren't there for me. I'm thinking, I'm always here, and I'm always working. So you always feel time crunch. You don't have that. But not only from your patients, you might feel that from your colleagues, from your significant other. So how do you cope with dealing with the pressures or the expectations of others that they want your time? Simon? You see, you looked positive there, so I picked on you.
I keep going sideways with your question, so I thought maybe you wouldn't ask me anymore. How do you keep track of your time? And
how do you deal with feeling pressured by that?
Feeling pressured. How do you guard your own time?
Yeah, exactly.
It's hard sometimes. It really is the bottom line. As Rowan's dictated or stated that before, is that you have to carve out time for other parts that you need to carve out time for. But yeah, it invades. I think being aware of what makes you unhappy as well is really important. We have there's more and more evidence now, or more and more research out there that shows, talks about physician wellness in particular. And if you don't sleep enough, if you don't eat properly, if you don't exercise, if you don't engage or collaborate or communicate with people that are meaningful to you, you become very bitter and grumpy and sad and depressed and, addicted, or, at the worst case, you're suicidal. And that comes with the pressure that can come with not having time or spending too much money, or having to work more and more and more. So the easy answer is don't do that. But it is. That's ultimately what you have to do, and you have to give your head a shake and say, what can we jetson here from this life? Because this ship is going down.
I agree. I think you just don't guilt yourself out. I mean, we can push ourselves into thinking all sorts of things and feeling pressured and time crunched, but that's how we're feeling. So as Simon says, you just don't guilt yourself about that. You're the one that's responsible for feeling guilty. You don't need to feel guilty, so stop doing that. And then you think, oh yes, I can stop doing that. But one of the strategies that I use when I have felt time pressured over the years, and this is family practice, so you're always feeling like, oh, geez, I can see more patients. I front end load my day. So it came to be that, if I thought that, people want me to be places, do things. For a while there, I just stopped doing it. I said, I can't be there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm sorry, that can't be, but I can be there at 7:30 in the morning, because it's really important to me that this happens. So I'm sorry I can't be there at 4, but boy, I can sure make it happen at 7:30. And I know that I have some control in the beginning of my day. And then when you get to your office, all of a sudden, you never know what happens for the rest of the day, and the whole day flies. So for a while, I just don't make super important commitments. And if I know it's a super important commitment, I know my day is going to go in a certain way, and there are some things you just cannot leave, then I will try to make those commitments in the morning. So I exercise in the morning because I know that's important to me. So I'll get up and make it a point of getting to the gym at 5:36 because that's important. If I left it to the end of the day, I would never get there because something always happens at the office. Do you have any other strategies, Ron, that you do for that?
I've learned I'm considered a somewhat crazy amongst the anesthesia land, where often, clinical work always rules and dominates, and people hate just giving up clinical work. It's tied to money. And I have to tell you, one of the things Beth said, make sure you don't spend more than you make. I'd also say be very clear early on. If you've got other interests in medicine otherwise, you have to protect them. And if that means giving up income, you should think about that early on. I tell you, it's a real rat race that some of my colleagues get into. Once you start making X amount of money, it's very hard to give it up. But, I think you have to be really strategic, and I think physicians have got themselves into some difficult places where it's money rules. You do, regardless of what you do have control of your clinical lives, and you have to be really intentional. I sell and give up clinical shifts. My colleagues think I'm insane. When I first came to BC, they said, oh, you can't sell shifts. You have to trade with someone. And I'm going, no, I just don't want to work it. Because in order to do my other things, and when I'm feeling particularly time pressured, like right now it's crazy time, right? Then I will actually intentionally look at my schedule and say, no, I don't want to do that anymore. And, we can invariably find friends and colleagues in our department who are willing to pick it up because they're happy to make more money. And I just sell it. I take a Friday off, because it's good for me, it's good for my husband and my sanity.
And you have to be okay with that.
You have to be okay with that. It's hard to be okay with that initially. Yeah. But if you start off, as a young physician, thinking that you have to immediately pay off all the debts, and I know everyone has debts, and try and buy a house in Vancouver, I think you need to be intentional from the very beginning and say to yourself, I want to do these other things, so I'm going to be sane about the clinical part of it.
Can I just speak quickly to your point, just to be a bit more practical rather than philosophical? the points being brought up right now are really important with also choosing not only your practice, but who you're working with and your group. And you have control on that too. So it so happens that with the Emerge setup where I work, as a group, we've decided that every 2 years, you need to take 2 or 3 months off. You don't work. You have a 2-month block that you've paid into over the course of that 2 years, and you're off. You don't have any shifts scheduled to you. And it seems kind of crazy. You get a bit of, you're still getting a bit paid, and so you can cover expenses, but you've got this time where when did you last have 2 months off where you didn't have to apply for a job, didn't have to study for an exam, didn't have to find a fellowship, didn't have to write a paper, or didn't have to do something? And that time, is really incredibly valuable. So pick your group as well. And sometimes these things are hard from an individual to say, hey, look, I need more time, or we need to change how we schedule it. So it's really, as a group, though, you can structure your lives more powerfully at a hospital level or a health administrator or a health authority level.
One last question. I think we'll give a go at it. Beth, I'll ask you first. Do you have any one of those, this was one of those mistakes in my life that, boy, learn from this mistake?
And it actually ties a lot into what was just discussed. When I first started practice, I tried to do it all and join every committee I was asked to and teach residents all the time and try to do absolutely everything and try to make as much money as all my colleagues were making. And it really didn't make me happier. It fed my ego, I guess, a little bit, but it really wasn't happier when I look at it. So I think that was my mistake, was trying to make too much money and do too many things and be that, even what the Royal College now wants you to be, like a scholar and an expert and a communicator and all those, it's too much, right? I don't know, we're all superhumans, we're all the top 2% of the population, but yet still we're asked to be oh, you need to be a leader and a mentor, and you need to be all these things, right? And a great cook and have a beautiful body and all these things, and you just can't. So, but I think I tried at the beginning, and that was a mistake. I wanted to just jump back and add one more thing to the last thing. One other strategy for carving out time is to tell everyone you're busy. And I know busy and the craze of busyness is silly, but if you tell everyone in your life or make them think that you're busy, you will stop being asked to do a lot of things. So it's great. So at home, everyone thinks I have a really busy clinical practice so that they couldn't ask me to do one more thing. I need to get the winter tires changed in my house. I'm not going to do that because everyone understands that I'm too busy. And then at work, they understand I have 4 kids. So they're like, oh, she's too busy to take on that extra task. So tell everyone you're busy, and you'll stop being asked. That's another strategy for being practical. I don't know. We're supposed to be practical or philosophical?
I don't know, Beth, because that goes against the thing where we all know as leaders that if you want something done, ask a busy woman.
It's true. It's true. That's true. Anyway, that was my
because she's extremely efficient with her time, usually.
Simon, what about any of your learn from maybe a mistake I made in my life?
Okay, I'm going to stay philosophical and stay away from details, but I have to confess that you get to a point in your life where, you've done all the things, you've graduated, you've got your degrees, you've got your leadership positions, you keep expecting some kind of happiness to show up on a plate and say, here you go, you're happy now, or you're balanced now, or here you are, well done, nice work, here's your t-shirt or your medal or your headband or whatever. And it doesn't roll like that. It really doesn't. And I still struggle with that, knowing, or, for a while I really expected that if I did more things, I did publish more papers, sat on more committees, taught more residents, I would get that. And all of those things individually I really love doing. I'm intrinsically motivated to do those things, but I thought it was going to lead me somewhere that I was going to have the happiness or I'm arrived, here I am on my success story. And you don't. It has to come from within, and you have to really do what you think is important in your life. And everyone's going to have a different take on what that is, but it has to come from within.
Thanks, Simon. Rowan?
Oh, yeah. I've made many you learn a lot of things, tough ways when you try and take on leadership roles, let me tell you. The many ways you can piss off your colleagues. Yeah, so I've learned that I can't expect everyone to go at the same speed that I go at, and I have to slow down because they just don't move as fast as I do sometimes. And that was one of those things you learn, and it was even when I was young, and you learn that, and you learn to be a little bit more intentional sometimes about your relationships. And I learned that actually fairly early on, and it actually just kind of changed your own assessment of how you behave as a leader, and then how you deal with others. And I spent a lot of time trying to read people. You have to as a leader. And you spend a little more time doing that. But you learn some hard ways. I've never forgotten the first protocol change I tried to do. I think I was 6 months into being a physician in a group, and I didn't know I was going to piss off all my male colleagues. I mean, I do that fairly regularly, but, it was quite awestruck because one was my mentor. I was going, really? Was that annoying? But the evidence would show that this is what you have to do. They were just, yeah, so I've learned many things. I was just want to say just briefly about identity because I didn't get to. Yeah. I find it a very interesting thing. My parents, my in-laws, they all talk to me, oh, there's the doctor, right? I was the first in the family. They're all just PhD researcher kind of things. We love to have that argument. My friends see me as that excellent cook, that excellent chef who loves to whip up a good meal, and that great gardener. And I love that. Because I don't identify myself solely as a physician. I identify myself with those other things that I get joy out of.
True enough. Don't let that start, because it's easy to become the doctor and stay the doctor your entire life. And I guess the only last thing that I can add on that one is what kind of piece of, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I had learned how to say no sooner. That means I wish I learned how to draw boundaries a little bit better sooner, and how to say no sooner. And so it came to a point where I actually didn't know how to say no. People say, oh, can you do this can you write up that piece of paper? Can you, see one more patient? Can you join this committee? Can you please put together some other strategy and protocol for us to better serve our patients in our clinic? Oh, sure, I'll do that. Didn't know how to say no. So it got to a point where I finally had to say, when someone phoned up and said, could you please join this committee? I'll say, well, just 1 minute here. I just have to ask my partners if it's okay. And I'd put the phone down, walk over to my partner, look at them, and they'll say, no. And then I could go back to the phone and say, geez, I'm so sorry. My partner said I couldn't do that. We're just too busy in the clinic right now. But I had to kind of learn how to do that over time, to learn how to say no. So if there was anything that you could incorporate sooner than later, is to learn where your personal boundaries are, and then be okay with saying, no, I'm going to protect my time. I have other things I have to do right now. Just say no. You're not needed that badly, because sure as heck, they're going to go to the next person and ask them the same thing. There's going to be someone who'll do it. You're not going to be the only one and you're not indispensable. Randy, one more thing for you in general. What strategies can people incorporate, starting right out, to build some work-life balance? Now, we know it's a myth. We've decided you can't have it all. But what are some of the practical strategies to help you start to figure that out?
I think one of the most practical strategies, and I've already mentioned this, is to be taking an inventory on a regular basis, to examine what's happening, I would say weekly, or if not a couple of times a week, to make sure that you're maintaining those activities that are keeping you happy. It's also maybe not so applied, but it's important to understand what's motivating you, whether it's money, whether it's ego, or whether you just are looking at more senior people in your field and seeing, wow, they're working hard, they don't seem to be ever at home, and yet they seem to be doing so well. Why is this not working for me? And what's important there is not to be basically judging your insides by other people's outsides, as they say in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think it's got a lot of merit, that saying. So it's taking an inventory. It is engaging in those activities that bring pleasure and joy to you. It is not becoming a used-to-do person. And to be continually in pursuit of, not continually, but to regularly be in pursuit of new activities, to expand yourself, and to ensure that you're nurturing and maintaining healthy relationships.
Thanks, Randy. Well, now it's your turn. All right, so if you have any questions, please just raise your hand. And I'd ask that when someone comes around to you with the mic, give us your name, identify yourself. Don't be shy. You can make up a name if you are too shy. And then tell us who you'd like to direct the question to, and go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Samantha. I'm a family med second-year resident. To the psychologist, I don't remember your name. Randy, okay. So in residency, we always learn how to always say yes to everything. And it's impractical to even think about saying no, because then you're going to get a bad evaluation, because then you're not going to look good in your program, you're not going to look good among your colleagues. You might not be offered a job, so on and so forth. So how can we, during residency, say no in a diplomatic way that doesn't harm our reputation and that actually gives us practice for the future when we need to do it for balance?
That's a very difficult question for me to answer because I don't have complete familiarity with your program. So I would ask the other panelists to feel free to speak in and at any time. But as I think out loud, and what I see in other professions, it is selectively saying no, but to ensure that you do say no at some point, even though that it is going to bring you some discomfort to be saying no, and there's fear attached to saying that. But as you say no, what you start to see is that there are not the negative consequences quite often that they are imagined. So just as a little side program, I do training on the national level for undercover police operations. That's a big area of where I do work. And there are people who are working their full-time job and then they're involved in undercover policing, which can be quite intense. And they're afraid, they're new to say no to taking on a project, but they may have already worked a 40, 50, 60-hour week, and now they may be working another 30 hours or another 25 hours. And the goal there is to actually face that fear, to say no, and then as you do that, you start to recognize that those anticipated consequences don't come to fruition. Of course, one has to be selective and one has to understand their work environment, and there are times where you will have to say yes even though you're wanting to say no. But it's to be selective, to try it out, and to learn to deal with your own discomfort of saying no. Much of saying no, the reason we don't do that is because it gives rise to discomfort and fear within us, and most of that is unfounded. Most of it's based on a cognitive distortion called emotional reasoning. We think that we're feeling a certain way, therefore we think it's true. But actually, we're feeling a certain way, but the objective reality is quite a bit different.
Could I jump in on that? Because I've learned one strategy from, I'm one of the owners of a fertility clinic, and we get asked a lot to sell a product or buy a product or do that. And Dr. Al Usby, you might know from the morning, I work with him, and he has a strategy for saying no to people who ask something of us. And this is how it goes. So someone says, will you please do this for me? Will you write a paper? Will you do this project? Will you work an extra shift? So what he does is he says, that's really a great project, and it has a lot of value. So you compliment the project, if that's sincere. So you compliment the project, and you say, I'm not the right person for that, or I'm not the person who has the time right now, but you know who does. And then you delegate, and in all seriousness, so you say, but you know who could help you with that? I know this person. And I mean, you're being honest, so you're saying that's a good project, or this is a good idea, if you believe that. You're indicating that you actually can't do it, and then you're redirecting them. And in most instances, at least in the business side of things, and I'm starting to incorporate that in when I'm asked, will you, sit on a special interest group or a task force? I'm like, I'm not, I don't really have the time for that, but you know who does? and I'm not trying to throw someone else under the bus, but you often know, have you thought about asking this person? So the person walks away, you've complimented their project, you've gotten out of it, and you might have actually offered them a solution. So that's my new strategy, by the way. So if you want something tangible.
It works, actually.
Al Usby, I have to credit Al Usby for that. But.
Simon, what do you think?
I'm a little concerned about you saying no as a resident, to be honest. I agree with the strategies, they're useful, and there's lots of different ways to say no, but they're coming from positions when you have autonomy. As a resident, your autonomy is compromised. And it's compromised for a finite period of time, thankfully. But during that period of time, you have to do a lot of different things. You have to learn a lot of stuff. You have to develop, some interests, and you also have to, get the appropriate grades and appropriate, you have to jump through the appropriate hoops. And there's some points where you just probably can't say no, quite frankly. I have to be honest. And then there's other times when obviously you should be saying no. If it's an ethical problem or an ethical thing or something that's obviously, goes beyond, the restrictions by, that you've got with PAR or the hospital or whatnot. So it's not a straightforward answer. You have to judge, because you will be judged for certain no's, and you'll be judged for those 2 or 5 years of your residency at that point. So you have to choose wisely and when to just suck it up and when to stand your ground.
I agree with that from point of view when we have family practice residents in my office over the last several years or decades. Give me a good reason. If you're going to say no as a resident, tell me why. And if it's food for thought, great, let's talk about it. And as Simon says, you choose wisely as to which one you say no to. Some things you just have to be there. And if I disagree with it, I'll say, you know what, this one is a really important case that you really have to see because I'm not sure you'll ever see that case again. So we really have to go for it. But other than that, if you give me a good reason, like my kid is sick and we're stuck, and there's, okay, I get that. But you can't pull the sick kid, sick dog, dead grandma, everything on me every single time. But, just give me a reason and talk about it. That's how I deal with my residents. Right?
Well, I agree with Simon. And I think one of the things, as well as you, Ron, I think one of the things is as a resident, one of the things is you show during your residency the things that you are interested in. You've actually already taken on some projects or other things. It actually then, it shows that you're already heading towards one way. You might get asked about other things less often, but it also means that you validly have taken on some other things. So, if you're taking on research projects or a staff asks you to do certain things, I'd say in terms of clinical cases, you don't get crazy by being there all the time. But the one interesting thing about medicine is if a really interesting case is coming up, don't lose the opportunity if it gets offered to you, because truly sometimes there are things you'll only see once or twice. And from that physician aspect, it's really good for you to see those things. So sometimes you have to make that other compromise to whatever else it was you were planning, because actually this was about the medicine, and it actually is really good that you actually see it and do it. And it actually feels good because you'll contribute to that. So sometimes you have to do it the other way around. You have to give up whatever else the other thing was.
Anybody else out there? Oh, come on, you're all so shy. There we go.
Hi, my name is Rob. I'm an emerged resident at St. Paul, so I'm an R3. The point was made about residents starting to have families as opposed to waiting until they're staff. So my question is more towards Beth and Simon. When you had little, and Beth, you have little ones at home now, but with that preschool, I've got a couple, like a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old at home. What did you do well when they were young, and what do you think you could have done better?
I never came to a show and breastfed my baby. But I think she's doing it really, really well, seriously, in all due respect. What do you do well? I think it's accepting what your role is and what you need to do from residency standpoint and what the realities are at home. And, it's classically a very, very busy, challenging time, and having children is one of those things that there's no real guidebook for, and there's no sort of pre-training for. You're never, everything is different that day you get a kid, and you have to then sort of mold that into what you're trying to do. So as an emerged resident, you need to work closely with the people that are running your program to support you in what you need to do at home and what you need to do to get through your program. Every residency director wants you to pass their program and wants you to do well in your program. So I think what can you do early on is ask for help when you need it, or try and get a mentor that has done something similar and to help you. That a mentorship role is pretty, is probably very, very valuable and something we haven't talked about here today. But I think that's a really good resource to someone who knows you and understands you a bit more and can bat for you and or guide you through the right channels for things that are perplexing to you, like saying no or having kids in residency in a busy time.
I don't really know what I did well. I was just saying earlier, one of my kids just got in trouble for saying poop and pee too much at school. So I'm not really like the role model of who did the preschool years well, because clearly our vocabulary was an issue. But I think getting help. Actually, I'm sitting here, but I actually have quite a bit of help. I have an excellent nanny, and I pay her more than anyone else, so she can never leave us. And I think that's actually taken a lot of stress away from my work, is because I just know that I have excellent help in a pinch. So that, I think that was kind of would be my advice, is if you need help, unless your partner stays at home, if you need help, get really good help and pay them really well so that they will never leave you, and treat them really well. They will never leave you, and then you'll be set. And that whole stress of, I need to get out of here to get home or something like that, is gone because you have really good help. So get some help. I actually had a family member, a cousin, who was our nanny it still is for the last 8 years, and it just takes away the stress of getting home. They don't leave you. It's, pay them well, pay your help well.
Anyone else?
I'm a third year dermatology resident. Along the same lines as the previous question, but kind of more practical, what are some tips that you found were life-changing in the sense that offered you more balance? Like you mentioned getting a good nanny, but like for you, if we had limited resources, like is it things that really helped you, like meal services or, personal trainer? Like what were some of the life-changing things that you could, or services or, things that you could suggest that contributed to balance for you? Yeah.
No, I was going to hand you the microphone.
I think help is great. I usually stop work by 2:30 so I can pick my kids up, because they really need you at the end of the school day. So every day I usually try to be the one that does the pickup, unless I'm in the OR. So that's most days of the month I do the pickup. And I think that has given the kids a sense that I was home all day waiting for them. And so they have this confidence that I'm there for them, which is completely false. But they think I'm there for them. And now I recognize that finishing my workday at 2:30 every day means that I make about $100,000 a year less than my colleagues who stay till 4 or 5. So I recognize that I'm making less money, but that's all right because we'll juggle things around. So these are not really practical tips, but I think kids want you there at the end of the day. I'm not so sure in the morning, so I'm usually gone in the morning. It's usually a bit chaotic. Everyone's running out the door anyway. So I feel that's a real value for me. A priority for me is to be home at the end of the day. I don't use a meal service, but with number 4, I have my nanny now arranging the meals so that it's all, like the carrots are chopped by the time I get home. So that was really helpful, because that was what we did. Is we did an inventory in our family and said, what are the stress points for us? And I was like, my stress point is that I now leave work early so I can be home with my kids at the end of the day, but I'm actually spending that whole time prepping meals. So I farmed out that role, and so find out where your stresses come from, and and get help if you can, and lean on other moms and other dads too, that to do pickups and drop-offs and things. That would be my 2 cents of it. Simon's gone farther than he's got older kids than me, so maybe you should jump in with the.
I've got a couple of stepkids, or I had a couple of stepkids. They kind of grew up, but when they were younger, when they were 5 and 6, I mean, the good thing was that they weren't subjected to my cooking, because I can't cook. But the one practical thing that I did teach them was that I taught them how to cook, like what I could do. So basically at 5 or 6, these kids could make a peanut butter sandwich. Or they could, go into the fridge and not cut themselves to pieces, because, they could throw together a salad because they thought it was fun to throw all these things in a bowl and look at what it looks like, But that was because I knew I could never get home necessarily. I could never guarantee that I could be home in time. They knew I would come home, but they were 2 boys, and the overriding effect on the 2 boys was they had to eat. They didn't care if they saw me or, my guy or anything. They needed to eat. So I said, okay, you guys need to eat. This is how you're going to do it. You're going to learn how to cook. So I taught them how to use a microwave, and I taught them how to make peanut butter sandwiches, and how to make a salad. And they grew up, and they're like 6 feet tall now, so they didn't die of malnutrition by the time they were 7. But that's kind of a practical thing that I found helped. And we did have a nanny as well, but they weren't around all the time either.
Ross? So I don't have children, but I do have other things that I have to do to save you some things. So there are time pressures in my life, things that I can't get done. And my husband's blind, so he doesn't drive, right? And so that's one of our things in life, right? So there are other things out there which you should think about using, like groceries. So there's this spud.ca, you know. They have got the most remarkable thing now, and it's not stupidly expensive, and they deliver it to your door at the same time every week, and you can even get them now to do a special delivery. I tell you, things like that, when you can take out things that are a stress, like getting some decent, healthy food at your door, use something like that, because they will deliver the greens, and you will feel guilty if you don't use them all up by the end of the week. It's true. That's how I get my husband to eat his vegetables. But seriously, things like that are out there. You have to you source them, and you say, these things then give me more time with the things that I find important, because grocery shopping for most people is a pain in the ass.
It's, underlying a lot of this is ensuring that the quality of the time that you're spending with important people in your life, whether it's your partner, your children, and all these resources allow for that. Whether it's someone who can provide nanny support or a cleaner, because cleaning is not good quality time. I mean, that's
the important. Get a cleaning lady.
Yeah.
If you have to spend any money whatsoever, the first thing, cleaning lady.
Yeah.
Make sure your kids learn how to clean a toilet by themselves. Especially if they're
true
boys.
enough. Besides peanut butter sandwiches, clean toilets.
But it is so that you can have good quality with whomever it is. And with kids, it's about, obviously a whole bunch of things, from physical activities, reading, artwork, music, but those are all quality activities that are enriching for you and for the children, and for forming good bonds.
And for all the valuable advice, just accept that right now, the position you're in with the busy life as a resident, and if you're a parent or doing other things, and you have no autonomy, or you have very little autonomy as a resident, or very little money, it can suck, or be very difficult. Like, it just end of story, full stop. Like, it gets better. So you can't solve everything. You sometimes just have to be there.
And you can't do it all. So use these time saver things. You can't do it all. I learned that the hard way. You can't.
I'd just like to add one other. At times, things do suck, that is for sure. But again, I think it's important to be careful not to get into the pattern of life just sucking all the time. Because as we form patterns in our brains, they stay with us, and they're hard to change. And I realize many things are out of your control right now, but as they come into control, you really have to take advantage of that and operationalize that and make the changes. Otherwise, 35 years will go by quickly, and you will have not made any change, and there'll be some regrets.
Anybody else with a question?
I don't know, it might be kind of a silly question. I'm a resident as well, and I also have a 10-month-old and a 2.5-year-old, so I think a lot of people here are desperate for how do we do this. But I know a lot of strategies for time management and balance are to do all the useful things in the morning. What do you guys do in the evening when you're really tired? Are there things that I can put in the evening that I can do that is not exercise and spending time with my kids and studying, which I'm all trying to front load the day with? So what do you guys do at night?
Simon, what do you do at night?
Go to work.
Beth, what do you do with your kids at night, or how do you
yell at
manage?
them to go to bed?
Yeah, how do you manage with? Are you asking? How do you have your own time?
Can you make that time useful? The time when you're tired and run down, is there ways to make that time?
Unfortunately, that's the only time I spend with my partner, is when I'm tired and run down. And it's it's the HALT. Have you ever heard that acronym HALT? Never fight with your partner when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Every night I am HALT. And that's the time I spend with my partner. And seriously, I watch Netflix and empty the dishwasher and spend time with. In fact, last night our power was out, and so that was really special time because we couldn't do anything, and that was wonderful. We should try to figure out a way to turn the power off. But that's the time I spend with my partner to try to nourish that.
Just so you know, at St. Paul's, every time 9 months after the power's out, there's a huge baby boom crazy.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's like a crazy nightmare.
Yeah, just to kind of morph on that a little bit, someone once said to me, I challenge you, can you not just sit still and just be okay with that? And I said, are you kidding me? I got things to do, places to go, people to see. I mean, I feel like being in medical school and residency, practice all day, I feel gypped if I've got this time for myself that's available and I'm not using it. Well, you know what? It's okay to be, but I haven't quite gotten, I'm not exactly a good candidate to say that yet still, but it's okay to be tired and say, yeah, I am tired. And it's okay not to do anything. It's all right. You don't have to guilt yourself out saying, oh, maybe I better clean the kids' room, or, maybe I better make their lunches tomorrow, or that, because you feel that you're driven by this busyness when you really are super tired and you really don't have anything left. But it's all right to give yourself permission just to say, okay, I'm just going to sit back and just regroup for a moment and read some trashy novel or something that doesn't bug me, play Candy Crush or something like that.
And that's the thing. Don't be guilty about taking time for yourself. You have to carve it out. And if it's offered to you in the evening, so I often crash in the evenings because I spend so much time doing other things. But I work too in the evenings too quite a bit. I'm an anesthesiologist, so that's out sometimes. You have to learn how to not feel guilty about being lazy.
Yes, that's exactly it.
You have to. And you have to find the thing that is really good for you during those downtimes. And if it's just sitting, as she said, and reading, God, read a trashy novel. Don't read a journal. Journals put you to sleep anyway. The trashy novel might keep you up, and you might enjoy it. It's good for your brain. But the thing is, when you find those little opportunities, you have to take them for yourself sometimes. If you have none of that time, you won't last 35 years. It's tough. You have to find those me times.
If you need a reason to be lazy because you just feel that guilt, one of the ways of thinking about it is by being lazy, it makes you more productive and it makes you better able to do the work that you do. And so that provides a rationale for it and allows you to let some of that go. The one other thing is that I haven't mentioned is technology and getting rid of some of the technology, turning off your phone, and really importantly, not searching news sources when you have your downtime. You don't need to know what ISIS is doing right now. It really isn't good for you. And so I would encourage you just to leave that alone and read a paper book or just tune out in some other way.
Can I just add one last thing? And it goes back to autonomy as a resident as well. There's certain things you have to do. You have to pass your exams. You have to see patients. What kind of resident are you? So imagine what you would say to a patient when they say to you, like, hey, in the evenings, you ain't got any strategies for like doing more when I've already studied, done a whole bunch of stuff at home, planned the next few weeks. Like you would, you know the answer, you know the evidence, and you have to apply it to yourself. But you also have to know when, like, you know what, I got to get through this next 3 weeks and pass this exam or write this paper. And then you need to go on the offensive and make the time where you're not exhausted in the evening or not. So it gets better when you have more autonomy. You have more autonomy and you have more money if you don't spend it all.
Turn it on. Hi, I'm CK here. I'm an anesthesia resident. Had some challenging times with. I'm in my mat leave right now, and this is my second mat leave. One of my mentors that I really like, the mentors that I really, really look up to, one of their amazing tricks that they do when they see that I'm in a moment of struggle is the first thing they say to me is, look, you are resilient. And the first time somebody said that to me, I was like, no, I'm not. I'm like struggling right now. But it's amazing how if you can say that to a colleague, like, look, you are resilient, you will be able to find a way out of this. It really empowers that person. And I would encourage all of us struggling. Sorry, I don't know what happened. But when we see somebody who's struggling, to sort of say that. The other trick that sometimes these guys don't have a lot of time, so they go, that's not true, that's not true, you'll figure this out. And I think that's a really, like, if you're ever with a partner that's, like, your resident friend is having a day down or something like that. Those are really, really helpful things to sort of help your partners. I think that's a personal opinion.
Alrighty, I think, you know what, we're going to, do we know if there are any questions from people outside who are watching? Kira, nothing? Okay. Let's have one more minute, each of you, for a parting shot. If you have one more piece of advice to give folks tonight, what would it be? Randy, let's start.
My parting advice would be look after yourself. And it's important to keep yourself psychologically well as physically well. And keeping yourself psychologically well, you've heard, you've studied ways of doing so, and it applies to you as much as it applies to your patients. So, look after yourself. That's the most important thing, and there's many wonderful ways of doing that, from mindfulness to relaxation to art to music to relationships to talking to having someone who you can talk to who understands you and being a good listener. And those are all helpful ways of looking after yourself.
And I'd say spend time in some self-reflection. If you have a partner, spend that time with them as well. You recognize there are always going to be incredibly busy times in your life, and residency is one of them. But make sure that you actually talk about what your goals are for the next 6 months to a year. Make sure you carve out some things that are important to you, that you've reflected about, that are important. And don't just let the craziness of residency take it all over. You have to be intentional about self-reflection and decide what it is that you really want to do.
Yeah, don't be afraid to push, pull, to do what you really want to do. If it doesn't make sense or it doesn't seem practical or isn't a clear path, well, make one. Find another one. If it hasn't been done before, well, still try if that's what you really want to do. But find the balance to take care of yourself and what you have chosen as your life. The people and the things in it.
My last comment would just be realize how lucky you are to have these problems. We're pretty lucky, right? And just pare down and be excellent at a couple things and let everything else go. That's what worked for me anyway. And recognizing that what you pare it down to, right now, for me, it's raising kids and being a good doctor. In 10 years, maybe it's going to be, climbing a mountain and being a good doctor. It's going to be two different things probably, or 3 different things then, and you can evolve, right? I don't plan to be breastfeeding for the next 15 years, and I hope I'll have other passions that I'll be good at, but I think I'll always recognize that there's not, the list of things that I'll be passionate about and good at is pretty small, and I have to recognize that I won't be good at everything, and that's really hard for where you are, because you're excellent right now at everything. And then as things get piled on, you have to maybe pick. So I would say pick wisely and be okay with the rest of the things being mediocre.
Recognize that life is always a series of trade-offs, okay? But consciously you can make those trade-offs. Something has to give for something else that you're going to get. And when you recognize that life is a series of trade-offs, then you're okay with it rather than being stressed out. And then the good news about all this is one day it's all going to end and you're going to be right out there with no worries. So it's only going to be another year, another 2 years or whatever, but it is going to end positively and you're all going to move forward. So that's the best part. There is an end in sight. Okay. I just want to thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you for taking part and asking good questions. And thank you to our panelists as well for providing input. Really appreciate it. Kira, just turn it over to you for some last parting words.
So thank you everyone for attending, and obviously a big thank you to our panelists. They'll be sticking around for the reception, so if you have any other questions and you just prefer to ask one of them personally, feel free to go up. They're willing to chat with you all and answer any other questions that you may have. Again, this is something that these type of events are something we're trying to do more often, either annually or biannually. So if any of you have any suggestions for future topics or areas of interest, feel free to come talk to myself, Marisa in the front row, or Rosemary in the back there. If anyone's interested in becoming an MAA member so they can get access to the MSAC building, again, please feel free to talk to one of our staff. And just before we end, I just want to thank you guys one more time for coming. And on behalf of our office, we have a small token of appreciation for you. So enjoy the reception. Thank you very much.